Everybody, welcome back to week 3 of Zach and I rank our favorite movies. I hope you've been enjoying these so far. They've been a lot of fun, and I hope you're getting to see our personalities a little bit more. I'm going to do Federico Fellini today, and this was an interesting one for me because I had probably seen, let's call it 3 or 4 of his movies before I started this. I had seen Eight and a Half. I knew that I loved it. I had seen Amarcord. And the first time I saw it, I actually did not like it, but I'll get into what turned me on that movie. And I had seen Nights of Cabiria, and and La Dolce Vita. Those were the 4. So I knew that I generally liked him. I thought he was an interesting guy. Eight and a Half for a long time I said was my favorite film. But I didn't really know what I was getting into. And I think, I'm glad I did him after Kurosawa because I think one of the things that came true to me as I was going through his filmography, Fellini's filmography, that is Kurosawa is big into realism. Even his, movie where it's more about his dreams and about the art and about his imagination, it's still very grounded in something real and personal for him. And I think Fellini, he is also very authentic, even though he jokes about calling himself a born liar. That's a famous quote that he had. What he meant by that, I think, is just more he's like a rascal. And the truth isn't always what it seems at first. And this is a theme that comes up in a big way in all of his movies, but not in the sense that it's ever a plot point that I can think of, but more that it's woven into every character. So one of the things that has really blown me away of going through all Fellini's films is that very few characters are one-dimensional. If he's going to show a sex worker, like in Nights of Cabiria, she's going to be this incredibly rich, dense person with a lot of history and a lot of personality outside of her profession. If he's going to show a faithful husband, like in some of the shorts that he made, or in some of the movies where there's an attempted faithful husband, he's going to show the other side of them as well, the rascal and the womanizer. But then at the same time, somebody who's trying to be I guess maintain the fidelity of the relationship. And so there's always 2 truths in the characters. And I think that's true in a lot of the interpretations of his movies. There's never one single truth. And I think that's my version of what he meant by being a born liar. And it's one thing that I was really drawn to in his films. And one reason why I think I am glad I saw him after Kurosawa, because it was sort of this journey for me of going from somebody highly artistic and highly technical and highly capable and a beautiful storyteller grounded in realism to somebody who started out in neorealism and then switched into fantasy and borderline experimental filmmaking later in his career, but definitely a surrealist, and one of the most commercial of the surrealist artists, at least in filmmaking. So it's just a little bit of background of who Fellini was for me, and why I like him so much, and why I'll go through this in a moment. But there's very few of his films that I don't like, and that's a big reason why. Okay, so let's just jump in. I just want to give a 5-minute background here on Fellini himself. So if you look at IMDb, there's 28 credits where he's listed as the director, right? The majority of them are either feature-length films, anthology films, a few TV productions, and some shorts and ads later in his life. And that's pretty much it. So he was a feature film director, and as his career went on, as he became more experimental, he also then got into shorts. But for a long time, he was a feature film director and somebody who really could hold a large vision and a very ambitious vision on Italian budgets, which are lower than typical Hollywood budgets, right? So he did get some international financing, of course, but he never had Michael Bay money or these big Hollywood director kind of backing. He was doing it all through the Italian studios and the Italian financing system. One of the other trends that I think I just want to mention is if you go through the history of his writers, it kind of paints an interesting picture of some of the rumors about Fellini. He started his career really rooted in neorealism, And I think that attracts a certain type of writer and creator. And as his career went on and he started getting into more experimental and surrealist art, his writers changed, his kind of core team of writers changed. And I am only hypothesizing, but I can't imagine that that's a coincidence. And I have heard on some of the special features and some of the booklets talking about having a creative split with some of his writers, that stayed in that more realistic style of filmmaking. So anyways, I think, look, he first film was in 1950. It was Variety Lights. And the last feature he made was in 1990. So he has a 40-year career. In that time, I'm going to talk about 24 pieces of work. There's 2 ads. If you look at the 28 director credits, there's 2 ads and 2 shorts that I'm not covering. So that takes it down to 24 features, which I'll be ranking. And yeah, let's jump into it. So right out of the gate, we're going to go 24, 23, 22, and 21. And there's only one feature in this lot. And there's some reasons for this. So 24, it's Fellini, A Director's Notebook, 1969. And I saw this as a special feature on one of his discs. I believe it's the special feature on, is it the rare video? No, or maybe it's even the Criterion set, actually. Maybe it's the Essential Fellini set. Is that right? But anyways, the only time I saw this was a special feature on one of the recordings, and the actual video and audio quality is quite bad. So it's a little difficult for me to follow and understand, but essentially it's kind of let me take one step back. So one of the things that Fellini does in some of his documentaries that I think anybody familiar with Abbas Kiarostami's work does as well, some of the Iranian filmmakers, is that Fellini challenges this idea of the narrative versus the documentary style of filmmaking, and what is really real, what is really fiction. And that's on display here. It's the purpose of this doc is to kind of follow Fellini around. This was made for television, and it's meant to just kind of show him, show a life, day in the life. But as you quickly find out, it's probably 80% true or 90% true, but it's not 100% real. And I don't think he even really hides that fact. But it's even within that, it still provides some interesting insight into the man and the style of filmmaking and the productions. 23 is his short with Terence Stamp, and it's part of 3 films, and the actual film set, I only have the French title, Historias Extraordinarias, or the Spanish title, excuse me. But it's 3 shorts, and the directors are Federico Fellini, Louis Malle, and Roger Vadim. These were okay. I gave it 3.5 stars on Letterboxd. Oh, Spirits of the Dead is what it's called, of course. That's right. That's what the anthology is called in English, Spirits of the Dead. It's okay. There's some people that say that their favorite is the Fellini one. And Terence Stamp does a good job. Yeah, it's okay. I didn't like Terence Stamp as much. These are all based on Edgar Allan Poe shorts. And I personally did not really like the Roger Vadim one. And so the Louis Malle and the Fellini one were ranked a little higher for me. But overall, this is, 3.5. It's okay. It doesn't really feel like a Fellini movie. But if you're looking for it, it is on, I believe it's actually on the Criterion set. His version, or his short as part of the anthology, I believe it's on the Essential Fellini set, and it's just called Toby Dammit. So you can look that up and just watch his part with Terence Stamp. And he's basically, go check it out if you're a completionist, or if you just disagree. I know some people really like this movie. For me, it never caught on, and I can tell that he's not a horror director. But anyways, so going down to 22, the Italian title is Il Bidone, and the English title is sort of a loose translation. It's not a perfect translation, but it's called The Swindlers. I actually went back and forth on this one. So I gave it 3 stars, and it's mostly because of the ending. So, this is it's an interesting story. For about the first 90 minutes, I was ready to rank this as one of my favorite movies. You see these con men start to pull, I guess, like financial scams on some of the more vulnerable members of the community, and they're really nasty fellas, like real despicable people. And it contrasts. This is what I'm talking about with these multiple truths in a Fellini movie, right? They turn it off, so that they're swindling and their con artistry. They turn off at 5 o'clock, and they go home, and they're family men, and they have families, and they have a social life, and they go drinking, and they have fun, and they're normal people. And then when they need to, they switch, and they go into this mode of being criminals. And it's great. Like, I really was enjoying the movie. And then the last 20 or 25 minutes, it's just I think he was trying to give a very specific message, and I won't spoil it. The problem was, unlike later Fellini movies, he just really kind of beat you over the head with the message, and it was very annoying. I hated it, actually. Maybe some people would say it was well done. I'm certainly open to that feedback if you liked it, but it was way too, I don't know, what's that saying, on the nose for me. Anyways, it was way too obvious for me. Just not the typical kind of, I don't feel like it was lazy for him. Let me just put it that way, because he usually puts so much thought and effort into his endings. And I did not like it. And so yeah, this one is ranked lower for me, even though I loved the first 90 minutes a lot. It wound up falling because I thought it ended quite poorly. This is a part of the Essential Fellini set. So this is an early movie for him. It's 1955, and it's part of the Essential Fellini set from Criterion. But you know what I'm not doing? I'm not doing They Shoot Pictures. I should actually, I'll start doing that now that we're getting into some of his feature films. So at the time that I wrote this, it was 1700. So the world obviously disagrees with me on here. And look, I get it. Like I said, the first part of this movie is quite amazing. It's currently 1,766th best movie of all time. So anyways, give it a shot if you want to. I did not like it. 21, I'm going to put another anthology picture ahead of this. I loved this anthology set. So it's called Love in the City, La Amore in Città. The directors are Fellini, Cesare Zavattini, Antonioni, a guy named Dino Risi, Carlo Lizani, Francesco Maselli, and Alberto Latuada. So I'm going to come back to Alberto Latuada in a moment. He was a very influential creator and director in Fellini's early career. I'll just say that Love in the City has a fantastic spirit to it. It's funny. I gave it 4.5 stars. I would have ranked it higher. The only reason why it was ranked where it was just because it was a short film, not a feature. But I loved it. I think, like, of all the anthologies, including a lot of horror anthologies, I think this group of creators used it in a wonderful way, and it's currently ranked as the 19,898th best movie of all time. I'm assuming that's just because of the anthology format, but it's great. Please watch this out or seek this out. Try to find it if you can. It is on. So there's a company called Raro, Raro, Raro Video, and they put out Italian movies specifically in the U.S. and in Italy, but they have a U.S. division. And so it's a release from them. It has commentary on all of the individual shorts. And so it's it's a good, high quality film. The sound is good. And I think it's well worth a watch. And again, one of my favorite anthologies. So now we're getting into the top 20. I said this in Kurosawa, and I'll say this here as well. I don't think there's a bad movie in this slot. So the difference between 20 for me and top 5 for me here is going to be kind of quibbling, or maybe there's individual aspects that I liked better. But there was something charming in all of these films, and something that resonated with me quite deeply. So let's start with number 20. It's in Italian, it's La Voce della Luna. It's the voice of the moon. And this has, it's definitely a late, so this is Fellini's last movie. And it had, at the time, a rising Italian comedic star, Roberto Benigni, as the star. And there's an interesting trend here that I guess it's kind of, I'm getting into it backwards a little bit because it was a theme throughout his work. But there's an interesting trend where Fellini, has this idea of the moon energy, right? The energy from the moon, and the effect on the moon on love and lust and what it does to people. And a lot of that is on display here in this film as well. And there's a moment in the movie, just to give you an idea of the surrealism that Fellini brings in to his commercial pictures. So there's a moment in this movie where they actually capture the moon and hide it. And so it's this is a very playful, fun story. It feels like a Fellini movie, and it also feels like maybe like a late Woody Allen or some of these movies where it's pieces of it, you can see elements of it, but it's certainly not peak. And so for me, that's why it's ranked a little bit lower. It's not peak Fellini. I still really enjoyed it. And I'm kind of torn on Roberto Benigni overall, to be honest, but he was good in this. Critics put this as the 8,517th best movie. So certainly there's Fellini movies that are higher, but it's appreciated, and I can respect that. Okay. Now, a really fun one. So there is another anthology piece next, number 19, is a movie that was made in 1962 called Boccaccio 70. And this is another one of these anthology films. This one is super fun. I'm pretty sure it's a Kino release. And it has, basically, it's a tale of lust or love in different ways. So it's Fellini, De Sica, Luchino Visconti, and then Mario Monicelli. And those are the 4 directors that make up this anthology. I gave it 5 stars when I rated it. The only reason it's 19, again, is just because of the anthology format. But this one, even more than Love in the City, this one is awesome. Like, this movie it's funny. It probably has some of my favorite comedic shorts in it. And it's again ranked low, I think, because of the format. 19,913th best picture of all time. I think if you were to abstract, any one of the individual films in this and make them into a feature length, they'd be a lot higher. This has this great scene. Fellini's one in particular is hilarious. As there's a kind of a prudish guy who's falling in love with the billboard, and it just watches him as the billboard actually comes to life, and it becomes almost like a monster movie. But it's amazing. So find Boccaccio 70. Like I said, I'm pretty sure it's a Kino release. Give it a shot if you can. You will not be disappointed. Okay, number 18. So we're going now into some of these movies are extremely personal for Fellini. So Director's Notebook certainly was that, but the format itself was just more lazy, or I mean, not lazy, I guess, but casual. Let's just call it that way. So 1970, he made a documentary that's, again, one of these ones where it's maybe 90% truth, but it's called The Clowns. This is the other release that I have from him from Raro Video. So it's there's a really interesting, one of his shorts is on here, but there's an interesting visual kind of essay on it's called Fellini Circus, that on this disc that I think is worth checking out. But here's the thing, Fellini grew up interested in the circus. He shares that with Alejandro Jodorowsky. And he grew up loving the spectacle, loving the absurdity of it. And a lot of his pictures, he's almost putting on a circus in some of his movies by the visuals that he brings in and the faces he brings in. And he kind of takes that spirit of a circus and brings it into his productions. So where there's always something interesting to put your eyes on, and it's very engaging, and it's like that style of entertainment, and the rhythm of a circus, and the loudness of a circus, catches your attention and draws you in. Like that's in a lot of his movies. And so this is a love letter to clowns, and a love letter to being is the a part of that old style of entertainment that's sort of dying out, um, and paying respect to it. And it's a very personal film for him. And honestly, it's one that I gave 3.5 stars. I like the movie a lot. I think if I were to watch it again, it might even be higher. But it's documentary as opposed to some of his features, and he gets pretty ambitious here, starting with the next one. So number 17, and this is okay. If you've seen this movie, La Città della Donna, I hope I'm saying that right, City of Women. If you've seen it and you would rank it higher, I would not fight you at all. This movie is awesome. It's totally bananas. It's rated as the 6,822nd best movie of all time. This movie did not make it into the Essential Fellini set, so I actually had to go to a French release from a company called Gaumont, or Gaumont. I don't know if you say the T. Luckily it had English subtitles, so I was able to watch it. It's region free. I am surprised that Criterion hasn't put this out. It's just the only thing I can think of is maybe rights issues, but it's made in 1980. This is, to me, sort of one of Fellini's, if you look through his filmography, this to me kind of represents, he had this phase of his career where he was trying big things. So Orchestra Rehearsal, I'll get into that. Casanova right before that, Ship Sails On right after this. He had this phase in his career where he was really making these big productions and trying something very daring. And I think what City of Women is, for me, is like, it's that, and it's in the context of being a story about an aging Marcello Mastroianni. He starts on a train, and he falls off this train, or jumps off this train, or gets off this train, and he finds himself in a kind of a forest, and he goes into this kind of like large, like almost like a conference style hotel. And from there it descends into this fantasy and dream and escapism around his relationship with women. And his wife comes in at one point, but it's an extremely Fellini movie. In you see this character who's lustful and chasing his desires, but also trying to do the right thing, and he's conflicted. But the way that he shows his internal conflict, is to kind of keep pushing forward and just figure it out as he goes. It has some amazing visuals. City of Women, very cool, interesting visuals, and the ending is I think something that would be worth discussing. Don't want to spoil it, but it's some people might say it's a lazy ending, and it might be why it's ranked a little lower. For me, that is true, but I could say some people saying they really loved it as well, and it's the only possible way this could be wrapped up. So if you have seen it and you're open to talking about it, come find me on Reddit or on Instagram or something, and let's chat. But then we're getting into some of these really heavy hitters here. So number 16 for me is Fellini's Roma, and this is on the Essential Fellini set. So it's a 1972 movie, and it's ranked in the top 1,000. So let's see. Currently, it's ranked as it was 617 last year, and well, I'll find it here in a moment. But anyways, it's right around there, I'm sure. And so this is let's see, here it is, 610 now. Perfect. So the thing is, Roma is a movie that I wanted to love. And there are certain moments in Roma that I adored, and would say rank as some of my favorite in his filmography. But essentially what he did is he took this kind of anthology idea that he's had in other, been involved with, some of the ones I've spoken about, and he kind of made his own anthology film. uh, where there's like it's like loosely tied around a plot of a young Fellini kind of going around a city and trying to make his way around Rome. It almost feels like a version of maybe Kurosawa's Dreams. I don't know how many of the stories in Roma are personal to him or just stories that he's heard. Some of them are very funny, and some of them are very well made and beautiful, and in the way that visually. But yeah, it's ranked this low for me. I gave it 3.5 stars, just because it wasn't consistent, and I felt like at 2 hours it was a bit long for me. Um, Obviously, some people disagree if it's ranked so high, but for me, I couldn't get into it the way that I could some of these moving forward. So that's getting through the first 16. Now, I would say we're probably in this phase now where I'm going to have a hard time saying there's too much, finding any flaws with these going forward. So be prepared for it to sound like I adore these all. Just fair warning. Number 15. Okay, so if y'all remember from the Kurosawa, what's it called? The one that I did 2 weeks ago. There was a film that he made called Maddadeo, and it was his late career, Kurosawa. And even though it probably wasn't technically like a great film compared to his others, it had a strong sentimental value for me. So number 15 for me is that. It's Fellini's version of that. It's called Ginger and Fred. It's made in 1986, and it's an aging Giulietta Messina and an aging Marcello Mastroianni. And it is it's a movie that is looking backwards at aging entertainers that are having it like one last chance to kind of make a stand or regain some of the notoriety that they had early in their career and fame, rekindling an old love and an old flame. And it's a very longing, the picture's full of longing. The picture's full of long kind of moments between Giulietta Messina and Marcello Mastroianni that you feel is authentic because they've been through so much together behind the scenes, just being associated with Fellini for so long. There was a while where Mastroianni would not work with Fellini, and so then they obviously rekindled. But this type of relationship, the goods and the bads and the pain and the love, it's all kind of mixed into these characters, but in a very sweet way. I like this movie quite a bit. The world does not agree with me. It puts it right now as the 20,619th best film. The only reason I can see for it being ranked low is the distribution for this film is tough. So I had to find on YouTube of all places, was the only version I could find with subtitles. And so it was like $3 on YouTube. I do have a disc from Italy, but it does not have English subtitles. So that was not helpful when I imported it all the way from Italy. I mean, it was cheap, luckily. But yeah, so Ginger and Fred, 1986, near the end of his career, he looks backwards. And to me, this really should have been his last picture. After that, he made Intervista and Voice of the Moon. We'll get into those shortly. Actually, we'll get into them presently. So Intervista is 1987. I thought this was really fun. So he essentially, in Intervista, he made a mockumentary, basically, or a fake documentary. And it's a lot of fun. So you see him early on meet this crew, this Japanese crew of documentarians that want to capture the life of Fellini. And it follows him around. He meets Marcello Mastroianni. He goes to the house of Sophia Loren, I believe. I hope I got that right. Or Anita Ekberg, excuse me. He goes to the house of Anita Ekberg. It follows him around as he's working through the lot, the Italian studio that he made all of his films. Cinecittà. I'm sorry, I know I'm going to get that name wrong, but it's going through the studio and his personal life, and it's done with a wink and a nod. You know that he's having fun with it, and it still is able to capture a lot of sweet moments. There's a really nice scene with Anita Ekberg where they're watching, where Marcello Mastroianni goes over to her house, the camera follows them there, and they have a sweet moment where they're watching La Dolce Vita, and it's just it's a little bit like Ginger and Fred was more sweet and maybe closer to a drama, although it had some comedy, obviously. But Intervista is more a comedy, I think, and more lighter. But it's still, he's in that phase where he's kind of remembering his life, remembering his career. All right, now we're gonna get into one that is probably, for anybody who's seen it and loves it, it's probably gonna be my first truly hot take, I think. Although feel free to shoot me a note if you disagree, of course, on any of these. So where are we at right now? We're at number 13, and I want to talk about La Strada. Okay, so hopefully a lot of y'all know about it. Anthony Quinn plays a abusive partner slash husband, and Giulietta Messina plays a dutiful and loyal spouse who helps him as they're traveling the country, basically in like a small circus or kind of as entertainers. I understand why this movie's so beloved. I really do get it. So if anybody says like this is their favorite Fellini, I get it. It's ranked as the 68th best movie of all time. So it has a lot of love. It's just so dark. I can't, you'll see, I said it on the Kurosawa thing. I'll say it here too. If I'm ranking movies, it has to be about enjoyment. I cannot watch this movie all the time. It's very good. But the message in it, I know there's a school of thought that there's optimism in this movie. I'm sorry, I call bullshit. That, like, she has a terrible life, and I won't give anything away, but to me, it doesn't get better. Very happy to discuss in more depth for any of those who have seen it and disagree. The first time I posted this review back, it was actually last year, I got into a lengthy discussion with somebody who did disagree, and they made their case, and I just don't see it. I think this is a cynical film, and I think Giulietta Messina is put through torture, and I don't think her character finds redemption, and so that's the only reason it's ranked lower for me. Going now to 12. It's a movie in Italian. It's called, oh, I'm sorry, I'm going to mess this up. Lo Schietto Bianco, the White Shake. This is a very early Fellini. This is the second movie, and definitely still in this kind of neorealism stage of his career. Hints of surrealism, maybe, if you think about, there's a scene where this couple kind of it's falling in love. They go out to sea and they're on a boat, and that scene has elements of, might be a little bit fantastical. There are circus elements within the film, entertaining. There's high movie production, loud, kind of some louder street scenes. But yeah, this is a different movie. This is before Fellini had really become full Fellini, I guess, so to speak. But I gave it 3.5 stars. I think this movie is very good. It does have the feel of maybe like a studio picture, something that it has his touch, but not necessarily full control over. I mentioned the writers, so this is interesting. Antonioni is actually one of the writers on this, and two of the team that becomes kind of his core team. So Tullio Pinelli and Ennio Flaiano, these two writers are with him on a lot of pictures, and they're here as well. Again, it's very early in his career. I'm sure he met them as part of the studio. It's a fun movie, very, very easy to watch, highly entertaining. But I think there's movies he does slightly better. It is 4,619th best of all time. Okay. Now, right before that, I'm going to his very first movie of all time, 1950. Giulietta Messina is in this, playing a character named Cabiria, which certainly comes back. If you look at the writers, it's an important one here. So it's co-directed and co-written by Alberto Latuada. He was a successful director. He gave a young Fellini a chance, and he guessed right this time, right? But he actually co-directed Variety Lights. If you look at the writers on this, Tullio Pinelli and Ennio Flaiano. So here we go, right? From the very beginning, these two were kind of around. I'm just imagining they were on the lot and happened to be drawn to this crazy man in Fellini. But I have to say this. So there's a sentence I wrote about it, and I like saying, "Is there any more fitting start to Fellini's career than a man entertaining a crowd of non-actors, basically the public, and they're just mildly enjoying his performance?" So the first thing you see in his career is basically a middling to failed entertainer. And I love that Fellini starts with that. I feel like that theme is kind of consistent with how he views himself and how he, especially early in his career. But, as we see movies like The Clowns, maybe how he perceives the public's reaction to circuses and clowns as the style of entertainment grows and changes. But I love that intro. Not really what the whole movie's about, but it's it's a fun movie. I've talked about this idea that Fellini brings in kind of two parts of the personality, this duality into his characters. It's certainly on display here. So the main character, Ceccio, he's trying to become that next level up, that impresario status. And so he takes on these young stars and he kind of begs, borrows, and steals to get going. And he has this destructive relationship with women. He can't help himself. So all of these themes are in there right away. People trying to better themselves, people that are swindling, either whether they're doing it intentionally or unintentionally, hustlers, people that have kind of mixed and troubled relationships with women. All these themes are baked into his story, his very first film. Highly entertaining. I gave it 4 stars, and it is rated as the 12,386 best picture of all time. I'm thinking that's just because not as many people have seen it, or maybe they just didn't like it as much. But to me, this film is great. It's a lot of fun, and I have it as my 11th best film of all time from Fellini. Now we're getting into top 10, the real heavy hitters for me. I'll talk about this more as I get into these. One of the themes that I think you're going to hear me talk a lot about in these 10 movies is the way that Fellini draws out things that are very personal, real life experience, and puts his own spin on them. And I think when he does that, his films are amazing. And so these ones really jumped out to me from movies where he was able to pull from his life in some capacity and make something beautiful. So number 10 was a movie that came out in 1973, certainly past like what you might call peak Fellini, but still, in the prime of his career. It is ranked as the 65th best film of all time. So the world loves it, and it's called Amarcord. The English translation is, I believe it's called I Remember, or To Remember, something like that. Look, this is one where I did not like it when I first saw it. Okay, I didn't get it. It felt meandering. But then I listened to the either commentary or I read a paper on it, or I read a analysis of it. I don't think this is giving away spoilers. I hope not. I'm just trying to think if there's a way to phrase this. But look, if you watch Amarcord, first of all, if you haven't seen it, I would say see it. And watch it through the lens of Fellini reacting to how he felt Mussolini and the church worked to keep Italians in a perpetual state of adolescence. Okay? In his perspective, they arrested the development of a nation by the way that they forced people into a state of immaturity. They were taught not to think. They were kept down financially, not able to grow financially, economically. They were not able to grow in education, and they were limited in, through the church. They were limited in imagination. And this is his angry reaction to that. And the way that he tells this story, because I don't believe he holds on to a lot of anger, or if he does, he gets it out in creative ways. The way he channels that is to tell a story of a small town that is getting ready for a festival, and is getting ready for a big send off for I guess the troops that are invading them, and they're there and in their land, in their city. And I think it's a movie that probably needs to be seen twice, but just go through with that lens of this is Fellini's reaction to what he views as an intentional or unintentional, but one of the consequences of being taken over by either a military group or a church group, and forcing an entire nation into this adolescence, and not able to grow fully and mature like they could otherwise. I think in that lens, to me, it's a meticulous picture. It's quite beautiful. I gave it 5 stars with that in mind. And it is, by the way, part of the Essential Fellini set. So, number 8. Number 9. Le Notti di Cabiria. All right, Nights of Cabiria. So this is another one that some people put as their favorite. I will say I watched it again recently, and it probably would move up for me on a second watch. I haven't updated the rankings yet. This movie is basically perfect. So Giulietta Messina, again, she plays this character that was introduced in Variety Lights, but not really fleshed out. She's a sex worker, and she's, excuse me, trying to better herself. So you see her work to save up. She has her own home. She does not sleep on the streets. She has maintained her sense of groundedness to the community. She's maintained her sense of self. She has confidence. She is not resigned to being a sex worker. She wants more for her life. And she pushes very hard for these things. And the first time I saw it, the reason I ranked this 9 instead of higher was because I felt that it was maybe a little cynical and the ending was hard to watch. But actually, I've come around on this. So I think it's a movie that benefits from watching it twice. I think knowing how it ends, for me, it made the movie much more sweet and optimistic. And I think there's a cyclical nature to the psychology of this movie that I loved, and I think is a really fun movie to discuss. So I still have it ranked as 9th. Again, if I re-rank, it might be higher, but I'd have to rewatch all these movies to re-rank, and so I don't know. We'll see. But I gave it 5 stars. This movie was ranked as the 196th best picture of all time. It's quite beloved, and I get it. And I think this is Giulietta Messina's favorite role for me, outside of one more movie, which we'll get to shortly. But amazing film. Okay, this one, there's a few of these that are coming up, 2 specifically, that are Fellini just unhinged. And I love them. So one of them is 1976. It's Fellini's Casanova. Okay, this actually did sneak into the top 1,000. I'm intrigued by that. So it's ranked as the 944th best picture of all time. It stars a Donald Sutherland in what has to be the craziest role he's ever had, if not one of the craziest roles of all times. I want to, mention that one of the writers on this movie is Bernardino Zapponi. So Bernardino Zapponi, if you look at when this movie was made, 1976, this is a writer that got attached to Fellini when he was in his surrealist phase. And they seem to be like 2 peas in a pod. This movie is nuts. It's just basically about this horny, insane, lustful guy. It's almost like you talk about the ego and the super ego and the id. This movie is almost like full id for Fellini, because it's just his retelling of Casanova. You get to see somebody so perverse and playful and naughty, but also childlike. And it's that duality in the character that's there. and scene to scene, you see both sides of this character. Sometimes even within the scene, you get to see both sides. And you see this guy who's so he views himself as this, wealthy, part of the wealthy court and part of what's it called, nobility, and he's kind of not quite there, but he's chasing it. And yeah. Anyways, it's just I gave it 4 stars. It's a movie that has to be seen. Some of the visuals in this, although they're tempered down compared to some of the ones we're going to talk about in a moment, but most of the visuals are done with set design. But they're still within the context of that. They're completely outlandish and crazy. There's a scene where Donald Sutherland's having sex with basically like this kind of circular crown that has candles on it on top of his head. Hilarious. I really love this movie. This is a Kino Lorber release, so not part of the Fellini set, but one that is amazing, and I think anybody should seek out. And it's a pity that it's not part of the Criterion Collection, but maybe one day it will be. Okay, speaking of personal stories, we're gonna kind of go back from the completely surreal, although there's elements of surrealism in this. Maybe it's a little bit lighter touch. Seventh favorite Fellini movie for me is a very personal one for him. It's Giulietta degli Spiriti. Again, sorry for any Italians. Juliet of the Spirits. So 5 stars. I gave this 5 stars. It's a movie that I found very few flaws in. It's just ranked a little bit below Casanova, 974th best film of all time. This is my favorite Giulietta Messina performance. I feel like in all of her other roles, she's acting, and she's a very good actor. But this feels to me like she's not acting. This is, I think, a little bit of a apology letter and a love letter to Messina from Fellini. There's some things going on in their personal life around this time. This was 1965. I think Fellini was somebody who there's a lot of very interesting documentaries about him. He certainly had his own struggles with fidelity, but and he was a difficult personality to be around anyways, but he was a man that loved very deeply and very passionately. And I think he rightfully, well, from what I can tell anyways, rightfully saw that Messina was somebody who understood him and he wanted in his life in a very meaningful way. And so this was a movie for her, recognizing his flaws as he saw them, not as the audience sees them. Recognizing her for being a very pure and honest soul, without being cheesy. The movie has a lot of honesty in it, and I think it's a very beautiful movie. It's very soft. It's very touching, and the supporting characters in this are fantastic. Some of the set pieces in here are quite beautiful, very striking, simple, I would say, but still quite beautiful. There's a scene where there's sort of like a sun tent that's being set up on the beach, where Juliet goes to sit on the beach and just be by ocean. And the way that he uses colors in this sun tent by one of her neighbors, there's very striking colors. It makes for very beautiful scenery. So Juliet of the Spirits, it is a part of the Essential Fellini set, and I give it 5 stars, and I have it ranked as number 7. Now, let me see. I want to make sure this is true. Number 6 is, well, okay, not quite true, but I think there's 2 more sort of neorealism films in here that I'm going to cover. So number 6 was an early film from Fellini. Right after Variety Lights and The White Shake, he made I Vitelloni. I don't think it has an Italian translation. I Vitelloni's 1953. It is a movie that's ranked really quite high on the list. It's ranked as 594th best film of all time. I know Adam from They Live by Film has said this is his favorite one. I get if somebody says this is their favorite one. It's a very extremely well-made movie. It's by the way, it is part of the Essential Fellini set. I don't know if I mentioned that. the theme here that I kind of called out is, in a small town, the more things change, the more they stay the same. So here's the thing: if you think about his career, he made Variety Lights, which was, certainly had his touches, but not personal movie. The White Shake, which again, I think it was him writing for somebody else. I Vitelloni seems to me like a movie where he was starting to write for himself. So five friends, as they kind of navigate life in a small town, they deal with their families, they deal with their jobs, they deal with their dreams. The title translates to loafers, layabouts. There's a translation called fattened calves, but it's this idea of people that are just kind of useless. And I think he means this in a funny way. Within the characters themselves, they certainly have dreams and aspirations of not being useless, but we get to watch them struggle with that and get into the same patterns of behaviors that keep them in their place. I think this, to me, I view this as a personal film for Fellini because he comes from a small town. He was able to get out, and I think it just strikes me of there's two different versions of Fellini's life. So had he not dropped everything and left this small town to go pursue to become Federico Fellini, become a knight, it's called Order of Merit in the Italian Republic, the alternative for him was to stay in Rimini, Italy, and work in a portrait shop. And so that was what his father's job was. And he chose not to do that and complain about what life could be, and he chose to take it by the horns and run hard towards that vision. And I love him for that. And I think this movie needs to be seen. And I think I put it as number 6. Like I said before, it could easily be moved around. All the films in here could easily be moved around. I don't really have anything negative to say here. It's a fantastic movie, and one that I hope everybody gets a chance to watch. All right, top 5. So I'll quickly go through these. I want to say these movies to me have all left a big impression on me in one way or another. I think about them a lot in different ways, different times. And there's different reasons, which I'll get into why that's true. But if I think about Fellini, these are the movies that jump out to me as the core Fellini film, right? So number 5, it's a Arrow Academy release on Blu-ray, if you're looking for it. It's called Orchestra Rehearsal, or The Decline of the West in C Major. I love this movie so much. Let me just say that. It's 1863rd. Imagine somebody who has the ability to take a story about literally orchestra rehearsal, okay, and turn it into a way that a group responds to crisis and war and potentially the end of the world. And it's almost like a Monty Python style of plot and story. And it easily could be a Monty Python scene, to be honest, sometimes. But the way that he does it, the way that he handles it is a very Fellini. It's extremely funny. I think it's shot a documentary at times, and it kind of switches back and forth between a documentary and a narrative seamlessly, so you never really know where his intention was. But it is amazing. One of his favorite composers, it was his work, Nino Rota. And the writer on this was Brunello Rondi, which is, again, one of these later life writers that he worked with, not a part of his initial crew. But yeah, 1978 Orchestra Rehearsal. I feel like it's extremely criminally underseen, and a movie that I love very dearly, and I hope you all get a chance to watch. Now, these top 4 are probably ones that are going to be no surprise, and ones that are probably all part of people's top 5, just ranked in different orders. But I'll explain why they're ranked they are the way for me. So number 4, I do not believe has an English title. I could be wrong, but it's La Dolce Vita. It's the 30th best movie of all time. 1960. This is peak Fellini when he was a commercial success, an artistic success. I think it's the last one. Let's see if this is true. Yeah. Other than the anthology film that he made, this is his move away from neorealism. And the way that I kind of talk about this, or think about this, excuse me, is that Fellini made a decision that he was still being confined within this genre of neorealism, and the writers were still trying to make movies that felt like they were working in that style, and they weren't fully him. So you see the beginnings of, I think, his wrestling with this, and they come to fruition in 8.5, which I'll get to shortly. But you see him wrestling, and you see him starting to feel uncomfortable with fame, and it's not enough, and he's unsatisfied or dissatisfied, and he's chasing love, but it's not the right kind of love. And I think there's just a lot of wrestling and unsettling behavior that's going on in this movie. And I think it's a beautiful movie. I gave it 5 stars. And Anita Ekberg is in this movie as one of the love interests. The other love interest is Anouk Aimee. This is the writing crew that really helped bring him up to fame. It's Tullio Pinelli, Ennio Flaiano, Brunello Rondi. Oh, I was wrong. I guess Rondi was there from the beginning, so he was also there in orchestra rehearsal. And then actually, funny enough, this one also was written by, at least contributed by, Pier Paolo Pasolini. So I had a lot of the Italian neorealist filmmakers there in the room. And they wrote a film that was both a celebration of Rome, as well as a interpersonal struggle as somebody works to define what their future is going to be and what's really important to them. I think it's one of the films that does that better than anything I've seen. Clearly a 5 stars, and I could watch it pretty much any time. I think it's a relatively perfect movie. I just happen to like these next 3 more. So 1969, Fellini drops something that I cannot imagine seeing Fellini's name attached to this, expecting, not knowing what to expect, and going in and watching Satyricon. So the writers on this were Brunello Rondi, Bernardino Zapponi. So this is when they started getting involved, and they based it off of a old plot by a guy named Petronius. But if you think about what was going on around this time, he made Juliet of the Spirits, Toby Dammit, which was that short film he made as part of the anthology. And this was his first declaration of not Fellini the neorealist, but Fellini the surrealist. And he made a sci-fi movie in every aspect, except for the fact that it doesn't take place in space, right? This movie takes place in ancient Rome. It's a play on the story of Satyricon. It's the story of a group of, I guess, older men and the younger boy, Gitone. And there's an earthquake that comes in and destroys the home, and he has a chance to leave. And he just kind of goes in between these different surrealist scenes and crazy scenes and orgies, and he is beloved everywhere he goes, and he gets to see this ancient Rome. And I love it for 2 reasons. Number one, I love it because it's watching Fellini break away from the neorealist traditions and put his stamp on the world and saying, this is who I am. It's exciting to see it, I think, in that historical context. But I believe it's a movie that if you can go into it knowing what to expect, it's just also such a damn fun movie to see. It's ranked as the 574th best movie of all time. It's just a constant visual feast, like this constant, it just hits you over the head with these crazy visuals and crazy scenarios, and the scale is huge. And like I said, it feels like a sci-fi movie as he goes through Rome, ancient Rome. But I think it's just the way that Fellini uses lighting and colors and set design and costumes, and the way that he tells this story is so unique. Never really seen anything like it. Clear 5 stars for me, and my third favorite film from him. These final two I'm going to talk about are just something that have that I love, and are probably number two is I'm going to say I love it more for emotional reasons, just in terms of what way it hit me. And number one, I'm going to say it's more of intellectual reasons, kind of intellectual and emotional reasons. But number two is in The Ship Sails On. So the Italian is E la nave va. The quickest way to, what year did it come out? This year, it came out in 1983. So this is a very late Fellini film, right? A very late career Fellini film. 1,589th best film of all time. This is a Wes Anderson movie. Yeah, I'm serious. It's a Wes Anderson movie. Not fully. It is 100% a Fellini movie, but the visuals and the way that he tells this story visually, it's a Wes Anderson movie. The other thing it is a opera. So he set an opera on a ship, this large ship, cruise ship, and we track this cruise as they're laying to rest an opera singer, the most famous opera singer in the world, who died. And in her last wishes, she wanted to have kind of a big party on a boat and be put to sea in a particular spot in her hometown where she was born. And so it tracks this crew of opera singers and reporters and the kind of economical elite or financial elite, as they're all the people who can afford essentially to go on this big party. I love this movie. The reason I have it ranked 2 is simply the way it makes me feel when I watch it. I have a big dumb smile on my face the whole time. It's such an enjoyable movie to watch. I love watching the real life opera singers when they do get to sing. I think Fellini weaves in the opera in very creative ways. It's such a unique movie. It's quietly, I think, one of his best movies. Not a lot of people talk about it as much, but I guarantee you won't be disappointed if you seek it out and find it. It is part of the essential Fellini set, so easy to find in that way. Okay, number one. So thanks again for going on this journey with me. My number one Fellini movie for me, and let me just double check if this is true, but I'm pretty sure my number one best movie of all time in general, yeah, it still is ranked number one for me. 8.5. So the reason it's called 8.5, I don't know if y'all know this, but it's he had made 8 feature-length films and 1 short film before this, so he had made 8.5 pictures in his mind. I love this film. Obviously, it's 5 stars for me. It's ranked very high. It's ranked as the 6th best movie of all time. So it's widely beloved. I don't have to heap the praises on this too much. I'll just tell you the reasons I love it. There's a I'm going to use this word loosely, so bear with me. There's a punk rock element to the way that Fellini was at the complete peak of his career after La Dolce Vita and Nights of Cabiria and Il Bidone was a success. Like, he just kept having these financial successes. He kept gaining notoriety and power, but inside he was wrestling. He was not happy. And he made a movie about a man whose name was Guido Anselmi. It's Marcello Mastroianni in the role. And this man is struggling as a writer. He has writer's block. He can't finish his picture. And I'm going to spoil the ending a little bit because I don't think it impacts the movie at all. He ends the movie by making this public declaration that the picture's back on and he's going to do it his way. And I think the way that I interpret this ending and the way that I interpret the flow of this movie and the overall story of this movie is this is Fellini in 1963 stamping his hands on the table, declaring to the world, I am not the director that you know me as. I am so much more than this. I need you to come along on this journey with me and trust me, and we're going to have some fun together, but I have to make my movies now. I cannot make your movies. I'm not a neorealist director. I'm Fellini, and here and just be embraced for what's about to come, what's about to hit. And he does, and I love it. And I think this movie is something that is worth every possible inch of praise it can get. And I hope you get a chance to see it if you haven't. Okay, look, We did it, y'all. Thank you so much for going on this journey. I could talk about Fellini for another hour. I know that I'm just talking to myself. Please find me on Reddit, find me on Instagram. Tell me you think my ratings are out of control. Tell me there's ones you love. Tell me the ones you hate. Like, let's talk. I really do. This whole thing for me is to get to know y'all, to get to engage with y'all. Find a way to reach out to me and tell me that I'm crazy for liking these movies as much as I do, or you love it. And thank you so much. We'll see you around very soon.